Welcome to Cope and Tell, a podcast about Copenhagen and Denmark's history. Written and produced by Danish historian and tour guide Rune Edberg. This podcast features excerpts from Rune Edberg's book Know Your Dane: Unlocking the Secrets to the Danish Mentality, as well as stories from his 2 walking tours, World War II and Copenhagen, and Copenhagen's Dark History Walk. It is possible to book a spot on these tours on the website copeandtell.com. On this episode,
Danes and the EU. On some points, one can compare Denmark's attitude towards the EU with Britain's attitude towards the EU. Both countries joined the original European Common Market, and both countries have always been skeptical about the association's power over the individual national state. Denmark is divided in this area, as a large group of people do not want to give Brussels power over the Danish parliament but also want strong European cooperation on trade. The Danes do not want to renounce their national currency, the Danish Kroner. Nevertheless, this is tied to the euro, just as the crown was tied to the Deutschmark in the past. The Danes have become more EU positive. After the British voted no to continue their membership in the EU, the Danes' general criticism towards the EU has changed and softened. In the past, Britain was a faithful ally of Denmark regarding critical EU issues. But after their exit, the Danes have changed their attitude. A new survey in 2018 conducted by Danish Broadcasting Corporation has shown that 55% of Danes today would vote yes to stay in the EU, whereas only 28% of Danes would vote no. Another survey from 2017, conducted by Gallup, has shown that the Danes are among 5 most EU-positive populations, in which 83% have a positive view of the EU, while only 13% have a negative view. The Christian conservative Danish newspaper, Kristelig Dagblad, has interviewed the researcher, Derek Beach, who specializes in international development, referendums, the EU, and globalization. He stressed the fact that the Danes are happy with the EU as an institution, inclusive of its economic cooperation in relation to trade. However, the Danes do not want the EU to interfere with how the country's national state manages the welfare society, as there is a consensus that the national state can easily do it themselves, and the Danes have a high degree of confidence that their social facilities can face competition and globalization. Danes and globalization. When it comes to globalization as a phenomenon, which affects areas such as media and communications, the economy, and immigration, both the Danish media and population are divided on the opinion of increased globalization as a good thing. On January 2, 2018, the politically oriented website, altinget.dk, conducted an interview with the director of Dansk Danish Industries, Carsten Dybvad. He believes that Denmark has benefited from globalization, as Danish companies are generally medium-sized and serve as subcontractors to larger foreign companies. This means that it can be difficult to staff highly specialized labor exclusively with Danes. Additionally, the foreign labor force has helped maintain the welfare society. At the same time, Dybvad believes that the debate on refugees and immigrants has warped the view of what globalization actually is. The fact that the Danish industry and population disagree with the positive effects of globalization in Denmark was also proved in an analysis conducted by the large Danish agricultural organization, Landbrug og Fødevarer, Agriculture and Food. In the analysis, only 45% of the population expressed that globalization has had a positive impact on the Danish economy. However, 85% of Danish companies believe that global trade has influenced the Danish economy positively. In 2016, Dansk Industry asked 3,000 selected Danes if globalization was good for Denmark. Several Danes expressed concerns about socio-economic decline. That is, if Eastern European craftsmen or poorly skilled drivers were exploited in the Danish labor market by working without a legal agreement, this would ultimately lower the median Danish salary overall. Danes and immigration. Immigration has always been a part of human life and development. There have always been people traveling through Denmark and subsequently settling there. Christian IV invited Dutch farmers and architects to Denmark to assist with the development of their respective industries. During the French Revolution, part of a religious minority sought refuge in Denmark, where they established themselves as merchants and brought their cultural traditions with them. Later, Jews came from Russia and Eastern Europe as well. For the last 100 years, people have come from several different parts of the world. Agricultural and industrial workers. There were several Swedes emigrating to Denmark during the same period as the Scandinavians were emigrating to the United States. Many of these Swedes worked on big Danish farms. During the same period, there was a large group of Polish immigrants who, according to the Museum Lolland Falster, settled in Denmark during the period of 1893 to 1929. They worked in Danish sugar production. After the end of World War II, a large group of Turkish guest workers was invited to Denmark in the 1960s and 1970s. They helped to keep production going in the increasingly industrialized Danish factories, thus helping to maintain the welfare state. Since the 1980s, immigration has been one of the dominant topics in Danish politics and an area that often divides the Danish population. The Danes' view on immigrants. The Danes' view on immigrants is a topic that divides the population. A large portion of Danes consider immigration to be a major challenge for Denmark's future. An international survey conducted by the analysis firm Nielsen, based on interviews with 30,000 people in 60 countries, showed that the Danes' biggest concern was immigration. At the same time, immigration has often been on the agenda of Danish politics, which has been a decisive factor during election years. Danish politics have generally made a right turn in the last decade. There was a great debate about the government's opposition to immigration, when the former Immigration and Integration Minister, Inger Støjberg, celebrated the 50th restriction on immigration with a cake, on which was written the number 50 and a Danish flag. This was in relation to the major refugee crises in the Mediterranean countries, as well as the Syrian civil war. Book a spot on Copentel's World War II walking tour in Copenhagen. Take a journey back to the 1940s, when the Nazi German forces had occupied the Danish capital. On this guided walking tour we will visit the city district of Vesterbro and the city center of Copenhagen. In the company of our historian Rune Edberg, who is specialized in the Second World War and the German occupation of Denmark 1940 to 1945, you will have the unique opportunity to visit some of the central places of the Danish freedom struggle during the Second World War. You'll become acquainted with the central themes and paradoxes of the period. Danes in the resistance movement and Danes in German service, which came to violent expression through assassinations and bomb attacks that divided the Danish population during the 5 long years from 1940 to 1945. We will stop outside at some of Copenhagen's most central locations and sites from the Second World War. This includes the former Gestapo headquarters at Shellhuset, where we will hear the story of the British bombing of the building on the 21st of March 1945 and its consequences. We will also visit the place where the resistance group Holger Dansk was founded and come past the dreaded addresses from which Hitler's henchmen ruled Denmark with an iron hand. You can book your spot on Copentel.com.
You have been listening to Copentel, a podcast about Copenhagen and Denmark's history. Written and produced by Danish historian and tour guide Rune Edberg. This podcast features excerpts from Rune Edberg's book Know Your Dane, Unlocking the Secrets to the Danish Mentality, as well as stories from his 2 walking tours, World War II and Copenhagen, and Copenhagen's Dark History Walk. It is possible to book a spot on these tours on the website copentel.com.